Class. In this video, we're going to talk about factoring. In the previous video, we used our magic numbers. We found our magic numbers, but in this video, we're actually going to be using them. So let's get started. A trinomial is a polynomial with three terms, so that's what we're working with here. Go ahead and change that to x. That was a typo there for you guys. And let's look at the problem. Step one. If I'm trying to factor out this trinomial, what do? You factor out the GCF if it exists. This is always your first step. So I want to look at these three terms and figure out, okay, do they have anything in common? And the answer is no, because these three are all prime. They don't have anything in common other than one. But I can't factor out a one. So I'm ready here to go. So I've done step one. Step two is identify the values of a, b, and c. So a is a number in front of x squared, and that number is 1. B is 3, and c is -10. Okay, so we've done step 2. Step 3 is multiply the values of a and c and identify their product. So we're going to take 1, and we're going to take -10, and multiply. This is part of the magic numbers video that we've seen before. So I went ahead and did step 3. Now step 4 is finding your magic number. So we are going to find the factors of -10. So 1 and 10, and 2 and 5. Now, magic numbers, remember you have to multiply these two numbers to get the product of -10, and you want to be able to add them and get b, which in this case is 3. So you have to look at both the set of numbers and try to figure out, okay, where can I put a negative sign in here so that I can go ahead and get the product of -10 and the sum of 3. So my 1 and 10 are not going to work. There's no combination that will help me do that. But if I look at 2 and 5 and I want a +3, I need this number 5 to be positive and my 2 to be negative, so that if I multiply them, I get -10. But if I add them, I also get 3. So this is my magic number right here. Alright, so that's step 4. Now this is what's new for you all. Okay, what you're going to do, step 5 says replace the middle terms with the two magic numbers. So let's go back to this trinomial up here. I'm going to go ahead and write x squared, because that one, it's not the middle terms, that's the leading term, so that's going to stay the same. But I'm going to go ahead and write -2, so I'm going to include an x. Okay, and I'll explain my reasoning in a second. Then my next term I'm going to write is +5x. And then my last term that's the same is -10. Oops, I'm going to do that so you guys can see it. So what did I just do? These two terms, I replaced 3x to put them inside of my, inside so I can factor. Notice that if I take -2x and I add 5x, I end up getting 3x. So we're just replacing that so that we can factor. So that is the step that you're trying to do. So that is your first, so that's the 5th step. Step number 6 says group the pairs to factor out the GCF. You should see 2 identical factors for each GCF. This is very, very important. Okay, I'll explain to you guys in a second what that actually means. So I'm going to group them together so the first 2 terms go together and the second 2 terms go together. Now I'm going to look at my first group here, x squared and -2x, and I have to ask myself, okay, what do they have in common? And the answer is they have x in common. They both have one x that I can pull out, but I can't take another number. So let's go ahead and write, I'm going to do a green here. I took out the x, and if I were to rewrite this problem, simplified version, so if I put an x in here, that's what's left over. And if I put -2, that is what's left over if I just take one x from this guy and an x from this one. So if I were to multiply them, you see that you would end up getting x squared times -2x. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the next group here. I look at 5x and negative 10, and what they have in common is that they have a positive 5. So I'm going to go ahead and take out a positive 5. But this is the part where a lot of people make mistakes. If you took out a positive 5, please go ahead and write that plus sign. You're going to need it later. And then let's go ahead and write what we have left over if you take out a 5. That is x minus 2. Okay, so this part right here where I've highlighted in step 6, you should see two identical factors for each GCF. So you should see, let me use a different, let's use orange or yellow. You see this factor right here, and you see this one. These are identical. This is your big clue in determining whether you did it correctly. If those two match, then you did it. You did the right thing. You took out the greatest common factor, and that is one of your factors. What's left over, what's written in green, is my second factor. So let me show you what you're going to do. All right, so step 7, we've done step 6. Step 7 is create a second factor using the coefficients of the common GCF. So let me show you what that means. So what I've highlighted in yellow, that is one of my factors. What's left over, so the x and the plus 5, that is my second factor. So this is the factored out form of x squared plus 3x minus 10. And the way you can check it, steps 8, is to just FOIL. Make sure you see, if I were to FOIL this out, let me show you what that looks like quickly. You will get x squared plus 3x minus 10, which was the original problem. So I can go ahead and write that my answer is x minus 2 and x plus 5. That is the factored out form. Doesn't matter which of these comes first. It's up to you, as long as you have x and then minus 2 and x plus 5. All right, so that was factoring. So let's go ahead and look at the next problems. Pause the video at any time so that you can figure it out on your own, and then you can check back with my answers. All right, so we have these two problems here. So I'm going to go ahead and start. My first step is to try to find the GCF of the first one. For this problem, there is a GCF. So what they have in common is the number 3. So I'm going to pull out a 3 from everything that's inside the these 3 terms. So I have x squared left over minus 2x minus 3. So this is actually the problem I'm working with. Okay. Now, if you have questions about this, please refer to the other video about finding the GCF. All right, so now my next step is to find A, B, and C. Now, I want to find A, B, and C from what's in here, not from the original problem, okay? So, that's why it's very important for us to find the GCF. Let's go ahead and do that. So, A equals, I have a 1 in here. We're going to find our A, B, and C. C is negative. Oops. Negative 3. There we go. Okay? So, we have to go and multiply A and C to get a product, and that is 1 times negative 3 is negative 3. And this one's an easy one because there's only 1 and 3 as their factors. So then we're going to go ahead and try to figure out, okay, I need a number, I need these two numbers that I can add up to get negative 2, but also get a product of negative 3. So because I have more, since negative 2 is negative, that means this 3 has to be a negative 3. Okay? Then we're going to go ahead and replace our middle term, negative 2x, with these magic numbers. So this is what it's going to look like. I'm only going to look at this part right now. Okay? So I'm going to write x squared. Let's write plus 1x, because that is what this is, that's 1x, minus 3x minus 3. Okay? So, the next step is to group them. The first two go together, the second group go together. And I'm going to go ahead and factor out the GCF. So let's use x squared and x. I can take out an x from both of them. So then that leaves me with 1x inside, so that I can get x squared if I multiply them, plus 1. So this is, oops, let me write that in black actually. Okay? So that means when I do my second group here, this has to be x plus 1 in the parentheses. So let's see. Alright, I'm going to look at negative 3 and negative 3x minus 3. The GCF between these two terms is negative 3. I could take out a negative 3. So let's go ahead and write what's left over. I have an x left over, because negative 3 times x gives you negative 3x. And then negative 3 times positive 1 gives you negative 3. So notice how the two factors that I've written out in the black ink, these match. So this is one of your factors. And the next factor is what's left over. So x minus 3. But because we factored out at the beginning a 3, that also needs to be written down in front of your two factors. Okay? So if you were to multiply these three factors, you would get the answer of 3x squared minus 6 minus 9. So right below here, I'm going to show that to you guys so that you know that this is your correct answer. Alright, so I went ahead and I wrote these down again here, and then I distributed the 3 into my first term, or my first factor here, and then I used FOIL to get the rest. And I went ahead and showed you my final answer matches my original problem. So that means that 3, x plus 1, and x minus 3 are factors of this problem. Alright, so we have one more. Let's try to figure out what the factors are. Alright, so if I look at 4x squared and a negative 36, I know that my GCF has to be a 4. That's what they have in common. So when I take out my 4, I'm going to go ahead and write what's left over inside the parentheses. That's x squared, and that's minus 9. Alright, so here is what I'm going to be looking at when I'm trying to find A, B, and C. So A equals, B equals, C equals. My A in this case is 1, but do you notice how there is no x term? Like for example, in this problem we had negative 6x, but this problem does not. So we're going to go ahead and write a 0. Okay, that is a possibility. And you have a negative 9SC. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and multiply 1 times negative 9 and find the factors of that. Now, my goal is to get a number, or two numbers, that I can multiply, get negative 9, and if I add them together, I get 0. So if I go ahead and look at my last two numbers, I can make the first negative 3 negative, and and have a positive 3. If I add those together, I will end up getting a 0. So now all I have to do is go ahead and use these two numbers and replace the number, what would have been my middle term. So I have x squared. I'm going to write minus 3x plus 3x, and then I'm going to write negative 9. Okay, so I'm going to factor out those two, have my two groups there. I have an x in common in the first group, and what I have left over. Oops, let's make that, let's write that in black. I have x minus 3 inside of the parentheses, so that means that has to be the exact same factor on the other one. I have, now look at my second group, I have 3x minus 9, so I can go ahead and take out a positive 3 from both of them, and be left with x minus 3. So, I'm going to go ahead and write my first factor that's inside the parentheses, that's one of them. Only write it one time. X plus 3 is the next one. But don't forget, if you ever take out a GCF, always write it down at the very end. So that is your final answer. Okay? So hopefully this video has given you some insight on how to factor. You can always rewatch this, or if you have any questions, you can ask me in class. But this is pretty much the idea of factoring. You will see this throughout your math career in high school and college, so make sure that you understand this before your test. Okay, so thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know.